Now, Mr. Greenspun, for those who were not in the court today to observe the proceedings, can you summarize maybe your top 3 or 4 points in terms of what you were saying to the judge?
This case is, as the judge described it, unprecedented for 2 essential reasons. The first is that in no other case in Canada, certainly no case that the judge was provided with, out of the 100 cases that she's given us to review, in no other case was it a situation where the demonstrators were invited in by the authorities, directed into where they should go, told where they should park, and then prosecuted because that's where they went. That's just not. It's not something that we've ever experienced. If you look at all of the protest cases, it's never a case of the police saying, you know what, go over there, and then they turn around and say, look, because you went over there, we're going to prosecute you. So that's the first element. The second element is we have the benefit of not 1 but 2 orders from a Superior Court judge in which he specifically recognized the right of the demonstrators to peacefully assemble, their right to do so, and this explicitly in his order said they remain and have the continuing right to peacefully demonstrate in our city. Again, there's no protest case or otherwise where in the middle of the case you have a judge saying, good housekeeping, seal of approval, you can keep doing what you're doing as long as you're doing it peacefully and safely and lawfully. And that's what makes this case very different from any other that has been put before me.
Mr. Greenspun, I found it fascinating. At one point you were referencing what we've seen in so many universities across Canada, these pro-Hamas encampments. And yet we do see, I've observed it several times myself, coded calls for genocide, vandalism, violence, whatnot. And I guess what I'm getting at is that there is a great concern amongst many people about what they would call two-tier policing and a double-standard political system. In other words, these actions, which many would say were far, far more egregious than anything that happened in this city in 2022, it's going by the wayside. In fact, in Toronto, you even had cops delivering coffee and Timbits to demonstrators, whereas there seems to be a disproportionate amount of resources going after Tamara Lich and Lich Barber. Your thoughts?
Well, a steak dinner to anybody who can repeat your question, David. We'll start with that. Look, this is a situation where the constant message from Barber was keep it peaceful, cooperate with the police. If you see somebody who's not cooperating, let us know, or you tell the police. The police got along famously for 3 weeks with the demonstrators. One thing that became clear, and that I emphasized again today, is that there was not a parking ticket, there was not a trespass notice, there was not a noise bylaw violation. Not one was served on any of the protesters during the 3 weeks that they were there. And now the Crown turns around and says, oh, it was unlawful what they did? I don't think so.
Here's a hypothetical question for you, Mr. Greenspun. Do you think if the politics of this protest were different, in other words, if this was about an Indigenous matter, if this was Black Lives Matter, because we saw years ago Justin Trudeau himself took part in those kind of demonstrations with Black Lives Matter. He even bent a knee, which was kind of funny because he is the Prime Minister, so is he bending the knee against himself? It's beyond my pay grade. But is that what it comes down to? There are certain, I guess, state-approved protests, and then there are those protests, well, it's the unacceptable fringe minority.
Well, I think this was a case where here you had in the nation's capital an incredibly successful, by all accounts, non-violent protest by a group of people who were suffering. And there's no question they were suffering as a result of the mandates, the COVID mandates that were brought into place. When the individuals, the demonstrators, came to Ottawa by the thousands, they did overwhelm the city. There's no question that there was interference with private property rights, enjoyment of property. But when you look at their democratic right to say no, we need these mandates changed. that should carry the day. And that really is the essence of the argument, that in a contest between fundamental freedoms in our Constitution, peaceful assembly, right, freedom of expression, those things should, excuse the expression, trump every time. They should trump every time there is an issue of enjoyment of property, right to enjoy property.
And Mr. Solomon, we're not quite out of the woods yet. The Crown needs about a half day for their oral submissions. We're back here ominously, if you're superstitious, on Friday the 13th of September. Any idea what the Crown might say to contradict the arguments you made today?
I can't imagine that they're going to have any arguments which aren't already contained in their 140 pages of written submissions or their 106 slides of amplification. But let's stay tuned. Let's see what they have to say.
One last question.
This is a last question.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You ended your submission today, Mr. Solomon, by quoting Benjamin Franklin, quote, "They who can give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety," end quote. What does that quotation mean in terms of the Trucker Freedom Convoy of 2022 and this trial?
Canadians have always been, in my view, far too quick to give up freedoms in exchange for the promise of security, for the promise of safety. We've done it historically over and over and over again, sadly. And then what's happened every time is the next generation or 2 generations later, we've had to apologize. So we've apologized to the Japanese Canadians, who we interned as a matter of safety, as a matter of security. We've apologized to the Italian Canadians. We've even apologized to the people who were arrested and held without rights as a result of the 1970 War Measures Act imposition by Justin's dad. We've apologized to all those generations. Surely we have to learn that we can't keep, as Canadians, we can't keep making the trade of freedoms for the promise of security. That freedoms need to prevail. And it may mean that you give up a little possible security. It may mean you give up a little bit of right to enjoyment of property. But that's a trade that we have to stop making.
Thanks for your time, sir.
Okay, I got one question for David and Mr. Greenspun.
Oh, yeah?
Okay, why do you think this trial is taking longer than the Louis Real trial? You know, the simple,
That's a very good question.
you know, that's ridiculous.
I was only 5 years old then.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, Dave.
That was funny, yes.
The best street reporter in Canada just spoke.
Notifying you
That's a good question, huh, David?
we're waiting for you to say hi.
Was that a good question?
Hi, I'm Amy WDBG TV. Please subscribe and hit my notification bell.